Hello, everyone, and I'm happy to be back with you. As you probably know, I do a number of iPad-related speeches and courses for TrainSignal. In fact, I'm excited. We've just released our latest version of the iPads in the Enterprise course. And during that course, I remembered that first and foremost, I'm just like each of you. I'm an IT pro, right? I need to get my job done with technology. So I made sure in that course that we included some sections on how to use the iPad for you. But we've never really done a webinar that just focused on how can the iPad make life easier for us, the IT pro. So that's what brings us together today. This isn't about how to make life easier for your users or your managers, your CEO. This is about how to make the iPad sing for you. So let's get going. First thing I want to talk about are a number of uses that are common to IT pros, managers, whoever in the organization, right? These are things that everyone's going to use the iPad for. And they include web surfing, file management, moving files onto network resources, off of network resources, video conferencing, what we're doing right now, webinars, that kind of thing. In addition, of course, we have email, probably the #1 use for an iPad in an organization. Document viewing and editing, this is something that consumers don't get into so much, but each of you do, right? You have Word documents and Excel spreadsheets. And of course, printing. Printing is one of those things most people don't think about when it comes to an iPad, but when we use the iPad as a tool, printing becomes really important. Say you want to print out a network capture, or you want to print the results of a certain test you run. Well, that's an important feature of the iPad, and it's more than supported. And I'm going to go through these slides pretty fast because I want today's webinar to be almost all live. We're going to be on the iPad, and I'm going to be showing you apps and tools that you can go get and start using. So how can IT rock the iPad? Well, we can use our iPads for remote support. Who amongst us doesn't do remote support, right? And it's not just because we're out of the office at night or on a weekend. We do remote support every day. We're probably in organizations where even if the user calling in for help isn't, across the country or in a different section of the world, they might be down the hall, but that hall could be, a mile long depending on the company, or even if it's, just a 5-minute walk across campus. It doesn't matter. Remote support certainly offers advantages, and the iPad has a great number of opportunities to fit in there, and we're going to look at some of those. Network monitoring. Did you know that you can use your iPad to keep track of all your core servers and infrastructure resources? This doesn't just include Windows devices or Apple devices. This includes Cisco equipment, Juniper equipment, firewall, switches, you name it. Of course, in looking at that, when we talk about those switches and routers, we get into device management, the ability to get in and make changes on those devices. Sometimes monitoring isn't enough. We need to go in and tweak things a little bit. Maybe we need to reboot a router. You can do that right from your iPad, and I'm going to show you how in just a moment. Remote control, now we get into more advanced forms of remote support. Maybe you want to take control of your Exchange server, your SQL server. Reference, PowerShell is a great tool for learning PowerShell. As my friend Don Jones is fond of saying, and is quite apropos, it's an era where we either learn PowerShell or we learn, would you like fries with that, right? PowerShell is pervasive in the Microsoft world, so it's important that as IT pros we know that. Well, Sapien has released a great reference for PowerShell commandlets, and if you want to take advantage of that, they have recently updated that app, so it is now a paid app. It used to be free, but now it'll cost you $4.99, but it's still a great tool. Finally, virtualization. We live in a virtualized world, so it's important that we be able to take advantage of those things, connect to those resources. And I'm going to actually show you an example of using a virtualized desktop right from my iPad. It's a great way to take control of not only your own desktop, but this is an actual opportunity to have your desktop hosted out in the cloud, connect to it, run your applications, and even run applications that aren't natively supported on iOS, such as Flash or that kind of content. Just remember, when you're thinking of possibilities, keep your mind open. Think outside the box. It's not just the tools I show you or that you've heard about. Just imagine that whatever it is you can think of, there's probably an app for it, because there probably is. And then go try and find that app. And do this by starting out by clearly defining what the goal or the purpose is that you're trying to accomplish, and then look for apps that achieve that. And what I like to do is get a handful of them, 4 or 5, and then test them. Okay, and once I find the one that works best, deploy it. Now, you do want to remember that there isn't really a great demo mechanism for iOS apps, so it's important that you look at either the app will be free, in which case it doesn't matter, it's very easy to demo because it doesn't cost you anything, or it will be low cost. Most apps are probably under $5, so it's an investment in testing. But this is why we don't have 30 apps we want to test. We want to narrow it down to a handful. Now, some apps will allow you to download a free limited version and do an in-app upgrade to a pro version that costs money. So that's it for the slide presentation. Let's get rocking the iPad here. So right now you should be able to see my iPad, and there is my adorable daughter, who you'll notice, even though she has enough toys to keep a small nation busy, her favorite toy is a box that I was opening, and so we cut eye holes, and there you go. Who would have thought? Well, I'm going to open my IT stuff group, and you're going to see a number of apps. Let's start out with one of my favorite basic tools, and that is the IT Tools app. The IT Tools app covers all those great TCP/IP troubleshooting tools that you start with anytime you have a problem. So we will go ahead and begin by looking at the ping feature. I need to ping a host, so I just tap up, and I can enter in the host I want to ping, and away we go. Okay, and I'll stop that. And besides just being able to do the ping, IT Tools supports being able to change a number of the parameters. You can adjust your payload, the time to live, right? You can set the max request from 1 to unlimited. And you can even change the IP version from IPv4 to IPv6. This is a pretty great feature as we migrate into the IPv6 world. Now, that's a basic ping, and of course we can ping by name also. And there you go. And down at the bottom, you'll notice I get my receive count, my loss count, and my standard ping results, min, max, average. So it's a great handy tool when somebody calls you and says, hey, what's going on? You don't have to run back to your desk or fire up your laptop. Pull out your iPad, bam, you're on it. And that brings up traceroute, because that goes hand in hand, right? So say we want to trace the route to our friends at TrainSignal. Well, there we go. It's rocking the trace route, and you'll notice that it will keep sending packets so that I can see performance over time of each hop. Very handy. And if I'd like to take a look at any particular hop, I can go ahead and do that a little bit closer. Again, I have options here that are available to change. And so now we've covered ping and traceroute, but we also have DNS. I want to do a DNS lookup. So let's go ahead and look up TrainSignal. And it takes care of all our standard NS lookup type things that we have going on. So we can see information about their MX records, their A records, any of their records. And in fact, we can configure what records to look for by going into our settings, changing the DNS types, and we can select multiple types. I can do a reverse DNS lookup. If we come down, you'll notice there's our pointer record. So it's a killer tool when you're troubleshooting IP connectivity problems. Beyond that, of course, we have who is, and then we get into some more advanced functionality with our interface information. I can actually look at my interface and the different settings related to it, the different parameters. I can go look at route information, and notice I see both IPv4 and IPv6 route information. And of course, if I want to take a peek at any of that in more detail, I can do so. And finally, I do have ARP tables. So I'm betting a few of you are thinking, wow, this is pretty handy because it does a lot of the things that we fire up our laptop to do when we're troubleshooting our networks. And then I do want to mention that in the more section here, we can look at the connections that our iPad has made recently, and we can also take a peek at NDP for our IPv6 neighbors. So that is an app called IT Tools, and I hope you find it as handy as I do. And since we're talking about network management at this point, let's dive into another of my favorite apps for network management, and that is GetConsole. Now, I'm betting at least a few of you support Cisco infrastructure, right? Do you have a switch from Cisco, a wireless access point, a router? Maybe you have a unified communication system. But I'm betting some of you have Cisco equipment, and you use handy old Telnet or SSH, PuTTY to get in and make some changes in the CLI. Did you know you can do that right from your iPad? And this is really handy because say that you get a call to go check something out in Network Closet 16. You run down there, and of course you can carry your iPad, or you can carry your notebook and boot it up and hold it on your knee as you connect the console cable and all these things. Or you can run down with your iPad. It's instantly on as soon as you take it out of sleep and fire up this GetConsole app. And you'll notice that there's your CLI. Okay, and just so you believe me that this is live, I'm connected to a 1941 router, I believe. I'll go ahead and log in. And there we go. And so now let's do a show run and see what's going on with this router. There you have it, and I can scroll the screen. Everybody can see what's going on my router. And I can also, of course, use all the keys that I normally use when I move around a CLI on a Cisco device. I can hit Control-C to terminate my listing, to break out of it. I could also, of course, execute any other command that I wanted to. For instance, I could do a show int. And there's my interfaces. But here's another cool little feature about this app. This commands button. Notice that it lists a number of commands. Like I could go into conft mode, right? There we are. I'll go ahead and change my host name. And notice my host name changed. I can hit the commands again and hit exit. But here's the really cool part. These aren't fixed. You can enter in any of the commands that you use most frequently. So you just go to Commands and Command Manager and type in the command that you want to add. So let's say we want to add a show int brief, do done. And now if I come back, you'll see there it is. And bam, there we go. This is a gem of a tool for Cisco administrators. It's great. I can't tell you how many Cisco devices I've supported over the years from my iPad while the guy next to me is still booting up his computer. Of course, when I say over the years, I mean within the last year or two, because the iPad isn't that old, but you get my point. Now, there are a few things to note here. Of course, you do have full configuration available. You can change baud rate settings. You can change SSH settings, any of those items. You can change, of course, the columns and lines, all that information. You can adjust your keyboards and do all that. But to take advantage of this app and really control Cisco equipment through the console, you do need to buy a special cable. And I'm going to go ahead and show you a picture of that. There's what that cable looks like. It's made by a company called Red Park, and it's a console cable. Now, they're showing it here for $59. I believe I've bought them for around $39. But the point is, you do need that cable. And you'll notice that it uses the old 30-pin dock connector, which is great if you have a iPad Gen 2 or 3, if you have an iPhone 4, because I've even done this from my iPhone when I've happened to been somewhere and they're like, hey, something's goofy going on the router. I've actually pulled it up and done a quick show tech support, for instance, to collect some logs so that we could see what was going on. You can do that. But if you want to run it on a 4th generation iPad, for instance, as I'm doing right now, you do need to get a 30-pin dock connector to Lightning adapter. That allows you to change that cable into a Lightning connector that you can plug into the current model iPads. And that is what I'm using right now, so you can see that it works. So there you go. We're already 2 apps in. Hopefully you've picked up something that you're like, wow, this is cool. I didn't know the iPad could do this. So let's back out of here and start looking at some remote control apps. And I'll start by showing you Splashtop. And Splashtop is a free app, and you need 2 components. There's a streamer component and a remote component. The remote component is what I'm running on my iPad right now, and the streamer is running on the PC that I want to control. And you see that I have a MacBook Air out there. And when I tap that, and this is where if I really had any sense of musical rhythm whatsoever, I would hum you the theme to Jeopardy. But okay, here we are. And I wanted to leave this enabled so you could see that Splashtop provides you different finger gestures to take control of things. You can, of course, do click and right click. You can also scroll windows or the screen. But the one to really remember, of course, I lost my connection for some reason. The one to really remember is that 3-finger tap that brings up the Splashtop controls. Okay. Well, Splashtop's going to misbehave for us here, so let's move on to the next app because I've got too many things to show you. I don't want to waste any time. So let's go ahead and take a peek at another of my favorite remote control apps, PocketCloud. PocketCloud is from Weiss, which is now owned by Dell, and it allows you to set up RDP connections, remote desktop protocol connections, to any of your computers or servers, as well as PC over IP, so you can connect into some VMware machines if you'd like. So there is a free version of PocketCloud and a paid version of PocketCloud. And the big differentiator between the two is that with PocketCloud Pro, you can save all your connectoids. So if you have 40 different machines you want to remote control into, then you can save all those and do them in one tap. Whereas with the free version, you can only have one connection at a time. So that can get tedious. And that is also another feature. You can connect to multiple machines with the Pro version. So I'll go ahead and tap the My Computers here so that you can see I have a number of different connections pre-configured on here. But adding a connection is as simple as hitting plus, and then you can tell it that it's a manual connection and what type. It does support VNC if you are using that. We'll tell it RDP, and you can see we get a number of settings, including the ability to run console mode, right? Normally when you RDP into a machine, you're establishing a new session, but we're in IT, a lot of times we want to connect to the actual console section or console session and see what's happening and control things from there. Well, you can support that. So if you have a Windows 2003 or later server that allows you to connect to the console, you can do that right from PocketCloud. You can set a remote desktop gateway if you use a gateway to get into your remote desktop machines. We also support network level authentication, so you can turn that on and off to get to your newer computer. Say you're connecting to a server 2008 R2 or a 2012 Windows 8 machine and you have it restricted to NLA, PocketCloud supports that. So let's go ahead and cancel out. And I'm going to connect to a machine here. And while this is connecting, I see someone has thrown up the question, what is the name of the second app? That would be GetConsole, GetConsole. Okay. And many of you should recognize this screen as Windows 8. So I'm now running Windows 8 from my iPad. And just to prove it, I'll rotate the view so that we're a little bit smaller here. And I'll go over to my desktop. Take it back around. And I want to show you the mouse controls here. So you'll notice that I get this wheel, and it allows me to move the mouse to wherever I want and then tap on the app. So if I want to go into Internet Explorer, I can tap the app. And it looks like I'm getting some lag here. There we go. It's coming, and there's my Windows 8. And just to prove, I can also get the charms to fire up. So there you can see the charms. Okay. And if I tap that, or in fact, that was the lower left hot corner. So here's there's your charms popping up. And let's go into the settings charm. And away we go. So we're running Windows 8 from an iPad. And I can move the screen around so that I can view into different parts of the screen. I can zoom in, pinch to zoom, zoom out. Okay. And we can go from there. So I'll go ahead and pop back over to my desktop because I want to also show you that you can bring up the keyboard and enter in functions like Alt F4 to bring up the shutdown Windows dialog, and then go ahead and click to sign out. So you can run it. Now, is it as convenient as running Windows 8 from a Windows 8 laptop or computer? No. But it's great and handy if you have to provide quick support or get into a machine and figure out what's going on, and you're not at a convenient location where you can fire up your computer and do so. And we can also take advantage of hosted desktops. This is something that Desktone has really taken to the next level. You can basically pay them a per desktop charge and they will commission you a desktop in the cloud. So you can go ahead and pay them a small fee and they will give you a Windows 7 or Windows 8, a Windows Server PC in the cloud, and then you can connect to it from wherever you are with internet connectivity. And those PCs can be joined to your domain. They can be integrated into Active Directory and have group policy applied. And while we're connecting here, let me look. I have another question on LogMeIn. What are my thoughts on LogMeIn? LogMeIn Ignition is a great tool, and if you already use LogMeIn in your organization, then it only makes sense that you extend that to your iPads, because you already know how to use the tool. You already have it set up for your users, so take advantage of it. Now, in this desktop, of course I have a message, but you'll see that this is Windows 7 and I have apps installed, so I can go ahead and open up Word, for instance. And there we go, there's my Word application. But I can also fire up Internet Explorer, and I'll go ahead and hit my favorites. And here's the Adobe Check Flash Player version site. We'll go ahead and open that up. This is a question I get a lot. How do I run Flash on an iPad? Well, of course, you don't run Flash on an iPad. You have to render that content behind the scenes because Flash itself will not run on iOS. So there are a number of browsers that will render it for you in the background and other types of solutions. Or you can do this. You can connect to a desktop and do the same process. And you can see I have a Flash movie playing, and Adobe confirms that I have the latest version of Flash for Windows 7 64-bit installed on this computer. And of course, I have full administrative access to this computer, so I can go ahead and install applications, do whatever I'd like to do. So we'll go into Control Panel. Change our settings here so that I can work with it a little better. Go into my administrative tools. And say I want to look at my event viewer. I can go ahead and do that. And again, I have full pinch to zoom support. Right, I can zoom in, zoom out. So say you're having a hard time double clicking it, you can zoom in to make that process easier, then zoom back out. And there's my event viewer. And there we go. That's remote hosted VDI in the cloud from Desktone. And we're using PocketCloud to connect to it. You can also use any other app. So you could use VMware View. So you could do that. I am connecting over PC over IP right now, but Desktone also supports RDP connectivity. It really depends on what works for your organization. So there we go. Now, yes, somebody threw up from my my comment earlier about log me in, that it's quite expensive. Yes, it is, and that's why you don't see it going on here. But if you've already made that investment, and many organizations have, then it makes sense for you. If you haven't and you need the ability to support users, this is where you can get into taking advantage of RDP that's built in to Windows, or take advantage of an app like Splashtop, which also gives you a no or low cost option. So there are other tools that allow you to provide that remote support. Now, there is a question about how to take remote control of the iPad itself. Now, there aren't any apps that really allow you to do that. Now, before you get up in arms, you can do that through advanced mobile device management solutions. So if you have an MDM product that allows you to take remote control of the iPad, that does give you some possibilities. But that is a much more advanced scenario, and it requires a significant investment in that MDM architecture. And the main reason that there is no remote control app for the iPad is because iOS is pretty explicitly designed to prevent that level of control. Everything is sandboxed and isolated, so apps can't touch different parts of the system that would really be necessary for that. So you can think more creative. Remember what I mentioned about think outside the box? You know, allow yourself to let your thoughts run wild and the possibilities open up. So you could, if you absolutely had to support a user that has an iPad and they're in their hotel room, and let me caution you, this isn't a suggestion of this being convenient, it's just possible. You could have them use, for instance, Air Server that I'm using right now so that you can see my iPad, and they could use Air Server to their PC, and then you could remotely control or view that PC. You still need them to press the buttons on the iPad, but at least you can see what's going on. And you can take advantage of that also through other broadcast apps from the iPad. It is in no stretch of the imagination convenient, but it at least allows you to see what's going on. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open up my settings really quick because I get a lot of questions about VPN support. And iOS supports VPNs out of the box. So you can deploy VPNs right now to your iPads and get them into your organization the same way you would connect PCs and such to create those secure connections. And you'll notice if I expand my connection that you'll see I have support for layer 2 tunneling protocol, point-to-point tunneling protocol, IPsec right here from the settings app, and I've pre-configured this IPsec connection. Now, just because this app says Cisco doesn't mean anything. It's IPsec. So if your firewall or VPN concentrator supports IPsec, odds are you can connect to it through this app. In fact, this connection right here is going to a WatchGuard device, not a Cisco device. And I did that intentionally just to show you that it doesn't matter. So don't get scared away by that. I know a number of people go, oh, well, that's a Cisco app, so I didn't think it would work. Don't worry about that. So I'll cancel out of here, and all I literally have to do to connect the VPN is make sure that the configuration I want is checked, which you can see AWS has a check, and flip the slider next to VPN from off. It will begin to establish the connection, and then it will form the connection. And you can see that I'm now connected via the VPN, and there's my server, there's the IP addresses of what I've connected to, as well as my connection inside the network. So if I left this VPN connected, you also notice that you can tell the VPN is connected by looking up here in the upper left corner of the iPad screen. There's now a VPN box. That shows you that you have a VPN connected at this moment. So let's go back into our IT Tools app, over to the ping utility, and let's ping one of the internal hosts. And you'll know that it pings just peachy. right? So there we go. Now, if I want to disconnect my VPN, of course, I just go back and I can flip the switch. And now, if you do happen to be in general, I don't have to go into the VPN. Notice that I have this VPN sitting right underneath the settings category that I can tap, and that will bring me to it and flip off. And that's there if you've pre-configured a VPN and connected to it. So, back into our IT stuff apps. As you can see, there's a ton of stuff to talk about here. And we've talked about some of our network management. We've talked about some of our remote support. Now, let's talk about printing for a moment. Let's look at the HP ePrint solution. And that's pretty nice because not only does it allow you to support your HP ePrint printers, which you may have, but not everybody's going to run out and replace all their printers with these ePrint capable printers. You may have one or two, but even if you don't, ePrint is your friend because HP has entered into agreements with Walmart and UPS stores all over the world to create public ePrint locations. So you can use this app and say you're traveling and you're traveling in San Francisco. Well, you can actually fire up this app, find a public ePrint location and print from your iPad to that location, stop by, pay them a small fee because, nobody does anything for free. So pay them a small fee and get your printout, right? And then you're ready to rock and go. You're ready to rock and roll. So you can see that here. This is my local ePrint printer. But if I go over to service and I pick, we'll say Cleveland, Ohio, and I'll go ahead and search on the server, it will take a moment, and then it will come back with all the locations that are registered with the public ePrint server. Okay, and there you go, right? And now I could pick one of these and print to it. Okay, and now you can also, with your ePrint device, print, of course, to the printer that's local. Now, with ePrint, you can print via email also. Okay, there is another app that's related called HP Printer Control, which allows you to take control of your HP printer and do more advanced functionality. For instance, this is a multi-function unit. So if I would like to scan, I can fire up the scanner and actuate the scanner. Okay, I can, of course, fire up copies. I can even look at the status of the printer. It's in PowerSave right now, right? I have ePrint turned on. I can turn it off. I can even look at the status of my ink cartridges. So this is handy. Now, Hanif is mentioning that HP ePrint has some security flaws which allow control of printing devices by everyone. And it's not by everyone, but this does bring up a good point. Every app has different mechanisms to work. So it's critical that you make sure that whatever your security policies are for your organization, that you match the app to those, because many apps won't fit with your particular security protocols. Many apps will. Many apps may have a flaw that is fixed in a newer version, and you need to make sure that that's the version you're installing. It's the same concerns you go through with Windows apps or Linux apps, anything that you deploy, but it is a very good point. And Donald's mentioning that they use AirWatch and it does not allow for remote control. I imagine it will soon. ZenPrize is one that does, and it is currently being purchased by Citrix. So go figure. It is one of the majors. But the important note is that it's an expensive solution. So now let's get in and look at file management, because this is a killer. I'm always wanting to copy things to a network storage device. I'm wanting to take some PDFs with me to read when I'm on an airplane or whatnot. Well, you need to be able to move those things, and the iPad doesn't come with a built-in Finder or Windows Explorer utility. So you can use this File Browser EX as my favorite file management utility, and it allows us to get in and do all the things that Windows Explorer Finder allow us to do. Plus, it integrates with cloud storage such as Dropbox or SkyDrive. Now, I know many of you are thinking, okay, Dropbox and SkyDrive, those aren't enterprise storage mechanisms, but as I mentioned, think outside the box. If you're just collaborating with a team, with your IT team or whatnot, they may serve your needs. They may be perfect for you, and they're low cost, easy to set up. Again, you have to make sure that they comply with your security requirements, but each of them have slightly different. So you can probably find one that works, or box.net. And so I'll go ahead and connect in, and you can see I'm in my Dropbox, and I can get into my Global Mantic folder, and I don't think I have anything in that folder. So let's go ahead and actually go back and go into my SkyDrive, and we'll go into Global Mantic, and it'll pull up here. I believe I have a logo folder, and there it is. And now I can open this, I can rename the file, I can do all the normal file management items. I can open it in another app. Of course, to do that, it will have to pull the file down so that it can open it in that other app, and I'm not going to wait for that because we have a limited amount of time. Although it is going rather fast, I guess I'll allow it to finish since it's faster than I expected it to be. But I can go ahead and open it in Printer Control to print. I can open it in Cloud On to see it in another app. I can even open it in my actual Dropbox or one of those. So if it was a file, and say I wanted to copy it to the local device, say I want to copy this Yamaha text file that I have here, I can tap that and I can say copy. Then I'll say OK on this instruction and pop back to my files, and then hit the action button here and hit paste one file. Now, I want to mention that this list is not exhaustive. I could talk to you for days and not cover every app and every possibility. There are 12 ways to do the same thing. So look for other apps. These may not be as exciting to you, but other apps that do similar type things will be. Okay, and for instance, if ePrint doesn't work for you, you can still handle printing through Google Cloud Print, and if that doesn't work for you, there is a great little print server from Lantronix that you can plug in that allows you to take advantage of your non-ePrint printers. It basically turns any printer into a accessible printer for AirPrint, so your iPads and iPhones can print to it. It's a great little device. I have one on the network here, and it allows me to leverage the investment that I already have in, laser jets and Ricoh MFCs, that kind of thing. So you can see I just moved the file, and now it's here, and if I tap it, I can view it full screen. Okay, and there it is. It's just a text file. I can also open it in another app, so I could open it in my Pages app for word processing. Again, my point here is that I can do all those things that I felt I was crippled out of the box that I couldn't do on my iPad that I can do on my Mac or on my Windows PC. So this is File Browser EX. Now, it is a paid app. Again, pretty cheap, but still paid. There is another app that works very similar, and there's a free version of it called Remote Files. So we'll go into it, and you'll notice that it has the same kind of layout and that sort of thing. We can go to recents. I haven't really set in. I can look at my network. Here's a NAS device I have and set up the settings for it. I can add new connections. So this is a free app that's available, and it is called Remote Files. Now, they do have a pro version that adds some extra features. And I do want to pop back into File Browser just so that you can see that I can connect to network devices. Here's that NAS, and you can see I can pop right into it. And this is great because this is a Office 2010 format document. That's what it was created in. And I want to show you another app, and we're going to use a great little segue here. And I am going to tell it to open this document in CloudOn. CloudOn is virtualization done a little bit differently. What they do is they virtualize Office. So you're running it on a Windows 7 machine on their servers, but it provides you the standard Office front end. And so it loads this workspace. While this is loading, let me take a question from Steen. Will you be able to read files on a file share, which is part of Microsoft Active Directory? Yes, you can enter credentials in File Browser EX to connect to those devices and authenticate. Of course, you'll be restricted to items that you have access to with those credentials, but you can get access. So there, we've opened this up in CloudOn. And I want you to notice that it looks just like Office 2010, doesn't it? I have a ribbon, and I can tap, for instance, page layout. I can pick a portion of the document and make modifications. I can highlight, right, change the font. I can do all the things I do in Office, except for anything that doesn't make sense, like wouldn't make sense to be able to do from an iPad, for instance, file save. That will be disabled. So if you notice, I can't even tap the file menu. Of course, you really can't see me doing that, but I'm a trustworthy guy. Coming from me, I know that means about nothing, but trust me, I'm tapping file and it's not doing anything. It's grayed out because those options really wouldn't apply since this is running on a back-end virtualized environment. So that is CloudOn. And you notice that I opened this document right from File Browser EX off of a network storage device into this environment, all from my iPad. So when you think the iPad is really limited, open your mind, think outside the box. You can do almost anything with the iPad. Now I want to take a moment here and look at my questions because they're stacking up and we're rapidly running out of time, and I don't want to miss anyone's question. I'm hoping that you've picked up a few ideas. As I mentioned, these aren't the only tools for doing these things. Okay, there are other tools, so don't feel limited by these tools. Is there an iPad tool for demos, like if I want to show the application running on my iPad remotely to someone? Well, you'll notice right now I'm showing you everything that's running on my iPad, and I'm using AirServer, which is the app. And what that does is it allows me to AirPlay stream the content from my iPad or iPhone or anything to a PC or Mac and view it there. It makes it great for recording it or for showing it off for training purposes, that kind of thing. I had a question about the GetConsole app or possibly the Splashtop and PocketCloud app about if they're compatible with an iPhone. Yes, they are. I have a question about a PCI DSS environment that requires two-factor authentication. Does the iPad support that? Yes, it does. The iPad supports certificates and advanced security concepts. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to get into it here, but we do get into it in depth in the course, and you can feel free to ping me offline, and I'll do my best to answer for you. We've answered the question about log me in. Will we be able to get a listing of recommended apps to conduct our own research? Sure, there'll be a number of the apps that we've gone over that you can get a list of, but again, remember, there's probably an app to do anything you want to do. We talked about the Lantronix device, the ePrint server. Do all the utilities you mentioned work with the iPad mini? They sure do. And then there's a question about the console cable for the iPad mini. And for that, again, you'll use this same console cable, but then you'll need to get a Lightning to 30-pin dock connector adapter. And I'll go ahead and show you what that will look like. They're not cheap. Of course, you have to get the genuine Apple because the Lightning connector has an authenticator chip in it. So this is why you don't find knockoff Lightning chargers or cables. And if you do, why they won't work very well. But there's two types of adapters. There's a cable adapter, and then there's this small adapter. And basically, it just allows you to plug that 30-pin dock connector into this side, and then plug the Lightning connector into your iPad mini or your 4th generation iPad. So, what was the name of the print device? That's the Lantronix with an X. And it's funny that I say with an X because the name of the device is the ePrint server. And there you go. You can see it right there. And that's literally the size of the device. It's just this little iPhone size box that plugs into the network and then takes care of it. I really appreciate all these great questions. You guys are doing awesome. Are there IT exam simulators? Yes, there are some reference tools out there for your IT exam preparation. Please go ahead and feel free to look them out. You can access Train Signal videos on the iPad also, so that is the best way to prepare for your IT exams, at least in my humble opinion. Can you show us the PowerShell app? Absolutely. And it is really a reference app, although there is a, excuse me, there is a PowerShell command line remote connectivity app that's out there. This is iPowerShell. This is the version 2 app. And if I go to services, notice that I can choose from commandlets and pick any number of commandlets. So let's say I want to pick a get commandlet. I can start typing, and of course it'll drop down to it. And you'll notice that not only does it have the standard commandlets, but a bunch of add-in commandlets. And the newer version has commandlets for PowerShell version 3. We'll pick get child item, good old dir. And there you go. So it's the same output that you get if you use the built-in help for PowerShell, but it's right from your iPad. Let's take a look here to see if we can't grab another Does Train Signal have in-depth training on this? Yes, absolutely. That is our newest iPad class, which I thought I had up here, but I don't. But it's called iPads in the Enterprise from yours truly. And we do go into great detail on not only apps and tools for IT, but also for different business units within the organization. So engineers, management, sales groups. We also go into great detail on security and mobile device management and a number of different items. I'm looking down. We've got a lot of great questions here, and I apologize if I've missed anyone's questions. I'm trying to get through everything as fast as I can. Is there an app to connect to a serial console port that is not a Cisco device and associated cable? You can use GetConsole to connect to other devices. Particularly, they work with other devices that support similar signaling or pinouts as Cisco. I know there's, I believe, some Juniper or F5 stuff that does, but you'll have to do a little checking on that. I can't tell you straight away whether the Red Park Cisco cable will work, but it's certainly worth checking into.